Hello, here's an interesting drawing of a Native American with a hawk in the background. I used a combination of soft pastels, pastel pencils and colored pencils. I'm going to be showing you how I did it, so let's have a look. I think I mentioned on a number of occasions that when I work with pastels, I work on regular drawing paper, so I don't have any sanded paper, which means that layering with pastels can be difficult and you generally have to try to work from light to dark. But the way to deal with a lot of these problems is to combine colored pencils with pastel pencils. I like to use the advantages of both of these types of pencils because pastels can produce really nice vibrant colors and they're very easy to blend. So they are very good for covering large areas and for blocking in and blending. On the other hand, the colored pencils can be used for detail and adding additional layers on top of the pastels. And as for the pastels, I use both the soft pastels, so the sticks, and the pastel pencils, whatever I have at hand. And occasionally, as you can see here, I also use a woodless charcoal pencil instead of a black pastel to do some of the darker areas. You can do the same thing with a black pastel pencil, but I find that charcoal sticks even better. Now what you'll see me doing here is that I first did a little bit of sketching with colored pencils, and then I'm going to put down some pastels on top of that. The reason why I did that was because I don't want the pastels to remove my sketch. So once I start working with pastels, and I'm going to be using a couple of these first for the skin, when I start covering the paper with pastels, I want the sketch to remain visible. So I used a dark brown colored pencil to sketch out some of the facial features and details, and then I'm going to start shading on top of that. If you're wondering what those scissors are there on my desk, I didn't use them for this drawing, they were just lying around there. Anyway, for the skin I used these two soft pastels, and now I'm using this reddish brown for the shadow side of the face. And for blending, I'm using a piece of material that's very similar to what's used in mouse pads. I find that this material is very good for blending, so I just cut off a piece of that mouse pad material and I use it to blend pastels. When I need to blend larger areas with pastel, I can just use my fingers. So once I blocked in my basic skin tones, and once I blocked in the light side and the shadow side of the face, I can start working on some additional shading and the details and the textures, which I'm going to be doing with my colored pencils. And the colored pencils that I'm going to be using here are mostly Faber-Castell's Polychromos. I'm going to be using several different browns. Like I said, I'm going to be using it both for additional blending, because I'm going to be shading on top of what I've already done with pastels, and to add some details, to add these wrinkles and to add some texture and things like that. While I was doing the intro, I skipped over the part where I did the hair, so I decided to do the hair with a charcoal pencil. I could also have used a black pastel for that, but it's very easy to blend, so it allowed me to draw that hair very, very quickly. And I also added some bluish tones to it. If you've noticed, I added a little bit of the blue Faber-Castell pencil on top of that. Now, a few words about the composition and my reference. I wanted to draw an Indian with a hawk on a branch in the background, but first I had to find a suitable reference photo, and I checked out a few reference photos or old photos of Native Americans, and I found one that I really liked, but I decided to make some changes. I mostly made some changes to the clothes. I simplified certain things, I added certain things, and of course I added that bird in the background. I also decided to create a very simple background that looks like blue sky. But what I liked about the reference photo of this particular Indian was that he looked very proud, and I liked his face, which looked like it was made of stone or wood or wrinkled, and I liked his facial expression. So you see, one of my main challenges, of course, here was drawing all of these wrinkles, while at the same time keeping in mind the larger shapes, the larger values, and the difference between the shadow side and the light side, because the shadow here is mostly on the left side. And the right side of his face is a little bit lighter. So in order to produce these nice textures and wrinkles, I immediately knew that I was going to use colored pencils on top of the pastel. If I were trying to do the same thing with pastel pencils, I would really need to work on a different type of paper, and I would probably need some higher quality pastel pencils to achieve this. But as I always say, you have to adapt to whatever tools you have, and I see no problem in using a combination of different types of pencils. I have nothing against using mixed media. And I do the same thing with my black and white drawings as well, because I like to combine charcoal with a black colored pencil and even a graphite pencil to produce the desired effect. So after a couple of years of experimenting with colored pencils and pastels, I just realized that I like neither of them, and that there are only certain things that I like about colored pencils and there are certain things that I like about pastels. So I just decided to combine these two and to take advantage of their advantages and try to eliminate what I feel are their shortcomings. And one of the shortcomings of pastels is that, well, obviously they are moved around very easily, and it's very difficult to draw details with them, and it's very difficult to do the same thing that you would do with colored pencils and to have the same amount of control when drawing some finer detail. But on the other hand, with colored pencils, they're just horrible for blending. They don't blend at all. You have to layer and layer and layer, which I don't have patience for. And I just don't like using any solvents or anything like that, because that increases a whole new host of problems and challenges. So I find that combining pastels and colored pencils is a very nice solution, at least for me. Some of you may not like this approach, but I think the results will look nice. So I'm doing the bird now, and I did the same thing. I blocked in the main colors with soft pastels and pastel pencils, and then I did a little bit of work with these colored pencils. And as you can see, I'm doing the beak. I added a little bit of blue to the beak. And I'm not only using the Faber-Castell colored pencils, because I have other brands as well, like Stadler and some others. I'm drawing a little bit of shadow here under the bird's head and neck to give it a little more volume and create the idea like that head is sticking out a little bit. So now I'm back to shading the face, and as you can see, I used my pencil eraser to pull a few highlights here and there. Just adding some of these wrinkles and pores. I don't know how much of the detail you'll be able to see, because I feel like whether I'm recording a video or taking a photo, I feel like it's never as good as what you can see in real life, because in real life you can see all of the nice textures and details. That's why when people buy some of my drawings, they're usually surprised by the level of detail, which is quite a bit larger than what they can see in photos or videos. But these are not super realistic drawings. I like to draw realistic drawings, but I rarely draw anything that's photorealistic. And you can see that I'm using the same approach here with these feathers. I really hate drawing feathers, and I'm not going to make them super realistic. I'm not too worried about details. I just make a few suggestions of feathers here and there, and then hopefully when somebody looks at the drawing, they can feel like it looks really realistic and convincing. And that's the power of suggestions. It's the same thing when you're drawing things like grass or rocks. Just a few suggestions of texture and things like that here and there, and the mind of the viewer feels like they're looking at something that's very, very detailed, but in fact I just used a few strokes to achieve that effect. So the desk I'm working on is usually a mess. You can see that I have all sorts of pencils there. And a lot of people often ask which brand of this or that you're using. Really, just use whatever you have at hand. That's what I do. I mean, the brands are really, really not that important. And as I've stressed with pastels, if you are really stubborn and want to work only with pastels exclusively, I would really recommend using sanded paper, because you'll be very frustrated when you try to produce more detailed drawings. But if you have no problem combining different media, then I would recommend doing the same thing that I do, which is combining pastels with colored pencils. And as long as you take the time to practice and get to know both of the media, I think you'll be able to combine them very successfully. So I drew a branch that this hawk is perched on, and now moving on to the clothes, to the Native Americans' clothes. I used dark brown for my base color, and I added a little bit of lighter color on top of that to make it smoother and to get it to look closer to to what I actually wanted. I wanted it to look like a little bit lighter, to produce an appearance a robe that was made out of animal hide. And now you can see that I'm drawing these fringes. And he also has some fur around his braids. So I'm going to be adding some other colors on top of that. But first I have to shade that area. So I had to improvise a lot with his clothes, because in my reference photo there were a lot of things that I didn't see properly, or that I wanted to omit. So I had to improvise and add some things of my own. And for this fur, I decided I wanted to make it look a little more grey, and I added a little bit of blue color to it. And I had to shade on top of the pastel with the same dark colored pencil to make those folds in the clothes more realistic. Here I decided to draw a necklace. I checked out a few reference photos of Native American necklaces, and I just wanted something that has a few nice colors, and I decided to add wolf's fangs to it, as you will see in a minute. So I use my pencil eraser to erase these fangs, and I will later be adding a little bit of white to them to make them stand out a little bit more, and also I'll have to shade around them as well. So I wanted a brownish color for his clothes, and I wanted these fringes. And I'm going to be drawing those on his chest as well. But right now I'm just shading that area to the left, which is a little bit darker. and I want to have some of them overlapping as well, so they kind of look like a mess right now, but once I start shading and give them some depth, they will start to look better. So I have to shade the areas in between them. And I'm doing all of that with a dark brown colored pencil, because it would be very difficult to achieve that level of detail with a pastel pencil. And another thing, in addition to the shading, another thing that I am using that colored pencil for is just adding some texture to make the surface of those clothes less smooth and more realistic. So here I added a little bit of white gel pen to those teeth, because I couldn't get them to look as white as I wanted, so I just added a touch of white gel pen so that they would really stand out. And you can see how, now that I've shaded in between these fringes and around them, how much they stand out against the background. I'm going to do the same thing with the fur on the right that I did on the left. Do most of the texture with this brown colored pencil and then add a little bit of bluish tones on top to make it look grayish. Just keep adding a little bit of value in between the fringes to make them stand out. And now I used a white gel pen on this fur as well to add a few details, a few flyaway lighter hairs here and there. In the reference photo, these details were reddish, I think, but I decided to make them green. I used a little bit of that olive green on the necklace as well. I need to make this area a little bit darker. And I want more texture and more value on this branch as well. A little bit of detail here around those braids and on the fur. I have to finish the bird and its feathers and legs. I'm going to be adding a little bit of yellow there, like I did on the beak, around the beak. As for the feathers, I'm just going to use a woodless charcoal pencil. Like I said, I can also use a black pastel pencil for that. I'm just going to draw these darker areas and work on them a little bit with a brush. And now I have to do the background. I'm going first lay down the white soft pastel and blend it with my finger, and I'm gonna add some blue on top of that. The reason why I'm first adding the white is because I want the blue to be lighter and smoother. So once I have white underneath, it's going to be blended very smoothly and it's going to be a little bit lighter, and I want it that way. I'm going to do the same thing around the other areas here. And if by any chance I happen to go over some parts of either the bird or the Indian, I'll just clean up the edges a little bit later. It's not a problem. Or I can just leave some of them a little bit blurry to make them look a little bit out of focus. And those parts which need to be in focus, I can just clean up the edges there, like here around the hair. Just adding a little bit more black here. And the drawing here is finished and sprayed with a fixative. I'm just going to sign it with a black colored pencil in the lower right corner. I hope you like the way it turned out, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give me a like and comment and subscribe. I'm just going to move it around a little bit so that you can see some of the detail, and zoom in a little bit so that you can see some of the texture on the face. There it is. I hope you enjoyed this video. Bye for now.